All right. Perfect.
Okay, let's do this, you guys.
Jamie, do you want to start, and then I'll take off from there if you pass the mic on after.
Okay. Bozu, Anin, my name is Thunderbird, and I'm the Loon Clan, and I'm Little Shell Chippewa. Kimberly, could you translate in our language, because I'm still learning our language?
Okay. Benishi Indishnakas, Magwan and Dodim, Inisinabi Isins and Dujiba.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And I'm now going to hand it over to the one and only Carl McKay.
Thanks, Jamie. And yes, it is muck-eye. Like I got some muck in my eye, you know what I mean? My grandpa would always say, they say McKay, but I say McKay. Thank you for the introduction, Jamie. Miigwech Marzi. Bonsoir. Good evening in Michif. Our voices are guided by the spirits of our kukums and mujums, of the past, present, and future generations. I offer my voice to enhance our shared knowledge of our shared Michif heritage. Li Michif Nianan, we are the Michif. Tonchi, Carl McKay Dashin Kashun. Hello, I'm Carl McKay. My mujum, Parkahar Kwan, was amongst the Cypress Hills Buffalo Hunting Brigade in partnership with the Nehiel Puat. Tonight, we are here to share the genealogy of the great-granddaughter of Big Bear, Mistahi Makwa, Sarah LeDeau. And tonight, we're going to review the genealogy of Sarah LeDeau Schmasow, pardon me. And I went and prepared a genealogy report. It's got about 44 pages, so I won't be able to get through all of it tonight. But I'd like to at least be able to get through half of it tonight, to the point where I finish the genealogy report. And then at the end of the report, I move on to the correlations to Petition 31 to the Bureau of Indian Affairs. And I believe that portion can be done in another Zoom meeting if we like to know more about that genealogy and her links to Petition 31. And we'll establish how far we get later. If I can have somebody please share the genealogy report, and then I'll have Sarah introduce herself real quick. Again, if you could, Sarah, and then I'll continue on with the report. And it's great to see you again, Sarah. It's been too long. I can't wait to see you again. I'll pass the mic on to you now.
Okay, thank you, Carl. I'm just so glad that I met you, because you've had shed some light on some things that were not necessarily right under my nose, or that I was aware of. But I have to say that my mom and my dad, they were both fluent speakers in their language, and I got to be around it, but they never actively taught it to us. And there's a lot of different reasons, but the main one was to attempt to not differentiate ourselves, because when I was growing up in Great Falls, Montana, it was a bitter experience going to all white schools, and we're the only Indians there. And at that time, I guess my awareness was very narrow. I did not know that other Indians were still alive. We thought they killed them all. But, you know, a kid that's 7 years old going to school being called a squaw, dirty Indian or you're filthy and making fun of how we talked was really a rude introduction into my first experiences with white people. Even though I was raised in Great Falls, we were on the fringes of Great Falls. We weren't actually in the town. So we had very little, if any, contact with white people because our family was so big. We didn't have much reason to go outside the family. Our relationships were very interlocked. Our recreation was, my family would get together at, like, say, my mom's oldest sister's place, and their pastime was playing cards. And sometimes they would have house dances, and my dad would play the fiddle, and we'd have guitar players. My family was very much into the musical part, both my mother and my dad's side of the family. So we were more like oh, how would I put it? We practice both cultures. The
Yeah.
Michif or Métis, my grandpa was very much into Métis culture, but he was also into the Ojibwe or Anishinaabe ways of ceremonies. They were practitioners of the ceremonies in Rocky Boy. And my grandma and my grandpa, LeDeau, they were interpreters for the Rocky Boy people when white people would come, onto the reservation. And one story that there's a more than one story, but one of the stories that I thought was kind of worth remembering was my grandma was trying to explain to these Indian women. There was a public health nurse that came in from Havre onto the reservation, and my grandma was trying to explain to them why they should eat oatmeal, because that's what these nurses were promoting is, eating oatmeal, as they were talking to them about nutrition. And so my grandma, in her effort to try to translate on how it'd be muscle building and, it was a good protein, it was something good to eat. My grandma, the translation was that you'd get big lumps. And so these Indian women were sitting there looking at each other and they started laughing. Why would we want big lumps? But that's the only thing that my grandma LeDeau could think of trying to translate. But my grandma LeDeau knew Cree, Anishinaabe, Michif, and French and English, 5 different languages that she spoke fluently. Likewise with my grandpa LeDeau, he was too an interpreter, and he was also a medicine man. And what was interesting about Rocky Boy is my grandpa, was very proud of being Métis, coming from Canada. He was very proud of that. He was never ashamed of that. But as the story was told to me, is a lot of the full bloods would come to my grandpa and he would doctor them. And my auntie would tell me about when my grandpa would go out and collect the different plants, to prepare them to doctor the
yeah.
people. And she told me, she said, they call my grandpa Papa. And she said, Papa used to tell us, don't you ever mess with this medicine unless somebody teaches you how to use it. So very early on, it was taught not to mess with Indian medicines because you could actually harm somebody if you didn't know what you were doing. With those medicines came prayers. The prayers were interlocked, interwoven into the medicines. And so anyway, I guess I have to say that when I was working on the San Carlos Apache Reservation, what reminded me of that, there was a doctor there from Russia. I don't know, IHS is always hiring people from all these different countries that, end up on a reservation. And this this Russian doctor was treating me, and I think I had it like an ear infection or something. And he when he came in the room and he was telling me about the medicine he was going to give me, he said, "Now, when you take this, say your Sarah prayer too." And it's like that memory came back very quickly about what my auntie was telling me about how my grandpa taught them about Indian medicine and how you would have to say a prayer along. You just didn't take the medicine without the prayer. And so that was a memory that was kind of jarred by this Russian doctor. I had to kind of chuckle. I was like, man, it took a Russian to help me remember that.
Thanks for sharing that. That's awesome. Thank you. I just thank you so much for the introduction, Sarah. Is there something else you wanted to just quickly add before we continue on with the report?
Well, I think it's if you must know, I have 2 daughters. Went to college on scholarships that I competed for. My tribe never gave me 1 cent ever to go to school. I competed for scholarships to get my bachelor's degree in education and my master's degree in substance abuse counseling and human services. And so anyway, I've been a teacher since 1981. I still teach full time. And so anyway, that's my that's where I'm at today. Still teaching.
Thank you, Sarah. And I've learned a lot from you. You're a great teacher, and thank you. I still have that blanket. It's right here. It keeps me warm when I'm researching.
Yay. I'm glad you have it.
I'm just going to quickly go over a couple of housekeeping rules, and then I'll dive into the genealogy report. So we're just going to quickly ask you to keep your mic muted, and unless you're asked to talk or you have a question at the end of the presentation. And as I'm presenting the report, I'm going to ask Sarah to keep her mic on in case there's something that doesn't seem right, or if she has a question she wants to ask me, because I don't own this report. Sarah does. This is Sarah's genealogy, not mine. But I learned a lot from doing this report. The genealogy of Sarah just woke me right up. My spirits talked to me. I've researched Big Bear in the past. He's pretty significant here. And I'll go on a little bit about Big Bear at the end, because I do finish the report with the hereditary chiefs at the end. Is there anything I missed, Jamie? Should we continue with the report now, or is there something we missed?
No, I don't believe we have missed anything, and I think you can go ahead.
All right, I'll have somebody put that report up on the screen. It's just going to take a couple seconds to load up, and there we are on page 1. Awesome. Thank you for putting that up there. So on page 1 there, we just kind of announced that it's Sarah, and we found this amazing picture of you, Sarah. And I'm certain that this is your high school graduation photograph in the yearbook. And I just wanted to put that in there real quick. And now we'll move on to page 2, where the genealogy fan. Okay, there we go. The genealogy of Sarah Schmasow is revealed within the genealogy fan below and throughout this document. As an enrolled member of the Little Shell tribe, Sarah is persistent in the pursuit of documenting her hereditary connection to the tribe and the community. As this document continues to unfold her genealogy, the hereditary links to Mustahi Makwa, or Chief Big Bear, Chief Little Bear, and Chief Red Leaf Wapasha are confirmed within. In addition to the aforementioned hereditary chiefs, Sarah is also hereditary to multiple participants in the 1885 Northwest Resistance, which concluded on the 3rd of June, 1885, at Loon Lake, Saskatchewan, north of Frenchman's Butte. Ignace Zinon Poitras is her second great-grandfather and is shown in handcuffs as he is a prisoner of the resistance at Batoche. Big Bear was among the prisoners and is also shown walking out of Stony Mountain Penitentiary after defending his people. the correlation between Big Bear and the participants of 1885 resistance would build relationships of everlasting understanding and perseverance. I'll move on to the first generation here real quick. I'm not going to do a lot of reading on the actual people, but it just shows her who she is, where she was born, kind of quickly there. Just scroll down to the second generation. Here's her parents. There's a significant amount of data on both of her parents. I did highlight some stuff here a bit later on with the LeDeau's. There is some census records a little further down, but I'll move on to the third generation now. And we have her grandpa, Edward LeDeau. He's born up here in Canada, actually. Well, it wasn't Canada at that time. Well, it was, and it wasn't. It's hard to explain. I don't want to get into detail on that, but we document her grandpa, Edward.
They had
That's
nations.
right.
The Nehiwat were nations.
Right. And at that time, the settlers didn't really have control of the law, or they couldn't really enforce the law because they didn't have anything really tangible to link it to. So we called it the District of Assiniboia up here in Canada, at least the Canadian settlers did. But I consider it the Anishinaabe homeland. He passed away in 1951 in Great Falls. They had quite a few children together with his spouse, Ida Lemire. They have children, Raymond, Lester, Joseph, Roland, Edward, Mary, Rose, Albert, Adam, Teresa, Angela, Paul, Catherine, and Flora. There's quite a few kids there. So I had to throw in this portrait of Ida Lemire in there. Just if you could scroll up just a little bit on the screen there to that picture of Ida. I think she kind of looks a lot like Sarah. So I just kind of threw that in there real quick and made a description of her below it.
Hey, Carl.
Yeah.
My older sister Leona is a dead ringer of my grandma LeDeau. My older sister Leona, you can't hardly tell them apart. They look so much alike.
It's amazing how the genetics link us together like that, right?
Yep.
So Ida, she's born in Montana, dies in Montana, passes away there at Deer Lodge. Same data with her, with the kids and that. She's only had one husband throughout, and that's what we got on Ida. And then I'll move on to Michael Cornelius Gladot. Just a quick summary of Michael Cornelius Gladot. He shows up on the Indian census rolls in some of my research notes, and that's really what the American government did to kind of do a head count of us. They came up with their own census of us Indians. It was, which they stopped doing it in the 1940s or 50s somewhere, but they hired specific census record keepers to come and document us, and it's just sickening. So that's Michael Cornelius Gladot, her maternal grandfather. So that's her mom's dad, right? And then we move on to Sarah Brienne, which is her maternal grandmother. How are we doing for the shared video there? Are we still able to keep the presentation up on the screen? Does everybody see it? Oh, there we go. All right. So I'm on page 4. There we go. Yeah, Michael Cornelius. Yeah, great. So I just kind of briefly explained him, and then we'll move on to his wife's explanation there, Sarah Brienne, which is Sarah's maternal grandmother, her mom's mom. Born in Montana, passes away there, buried at Mount Olivet Cemetery. Eventually does divorce Michael Gladue and remarries Thomas Claiborne. And I have some more documentation on that. We'll move on to the 4th generation now on page 6, please. There we are. And here we have the quick breakdown of Pierre LeDeau, Sarah's paternal great-grandfather. He's born up here north of the Medicine Line as well, in the Assiniboia district or territory of the Northwest Territories, and ends up baptized in the historical community of St. Francis Xavier, which is pretty close to Winnipeg, Manitoba in current terms. He passes away in Maple Creek, which is a little bit closer to Montana, and ends up getting buried there. He marries Helene Poitras, and they have 3 children: Jean-Baptiste, Edward, Mary, and Angel. Sorry, that's 4 children. And I've got a portrait of Helene Poitras there. How we doing with that presentation? I know it's, I tried getting it up there on Zoom as well, and hopefully everything's going good there. Can everybody see the presentation? Yeah, okay. All right, so we got a portrait of Helene Poitras here. Helene Poitras is Sarah's paternal great-grandmother. She's also born in St. Francis Xavier on the Assiniboia Terre within the Anishinaabe homeland. She passes away at Maple Creek as well, same spot as her husband kind of thing. She doesn't remarry. She only stays married to Pierre. And then we'll move on to the next group in her 4th generation on page 7 of the presentation. So on page 7, we show Patrick Lemire, and this is an important person. So I put a baptism record in here. So Patrick Lemire, he's born up here as well, north of the Medicine Line up in Wood Mountain, which is basically White Bear Reserve now, in a contemporary perspective, on the Assiniboia Territory within the Anishinaabe homeland. He passes away in Havre Hill County, Montana, ends up on quite a few census records, ends up marrying the granddaughter of Big Bear named Eliza Little Bear. They have 2 children together, Marie Rose and Ida and Joseph. Sorry, that's 3. And then he remarries later on to Veronica Smith and has 2 more kids, which Sarah's not hereditary to. If we could be on page, page 7 there, I've got a screenshot of a baptism, a marriage record, and it's in French. So if you need an interpretation of what's on that record, I've got some interpreters that'll help us with that, and we can just send those questions in at the end. But basically, I do a summary of it below. It shows her hereditary maternal relatives listed above as the groom Patrice Patrick Lemire. Bride is Liza Little Bear. Bride's mother is Isabel Namak Tijal. And I'm assuming that Isabel was just kind of like the mother of the community, like the mother of the clan mother, because her mom probably wasn't around, neither was her dad, right? When she's getting married because of the resistance. So anyway, she marries Patrick up at North Battleford, Saskatchewan here. Goes on to name the groom's family as well, the father Pierre Lemire and the groom's mother Therese Peltier. And Patrick and Liza Little Bear were married on the 17th of February, 1890 in North Battleford, Saskatchewan territory. And that would be on the Cree homeland. We're north of the river there. We're north of the big river, the Saskatchewan, or as the Cree say it, Kashishiwan, swift river, fast moving river. And so that is where Big Bear, that's really close to where the resistance had its stronghold. So I'll go on to describe Liza Little Bear a little bit more here. Liza is the paternal great-grandmother to Sarah. That Liza is born in 1876 in the Saskatchewan territory, passes away on Rocky Boy Reservation. Her spouse is Patrick Lemire, of course, and they have 2 children together, 3, Marie Rose, Ida, and Joseph. Ida would be Sarah's hereditary lineage. She does eventually remarry when Patrice passes away to Kent Bowers Blacktongue, but he's not hereditary to Sarah, so I didn't elaborate too much on him. But that's where Eliza ends up with the last name Blacktongue eventually, is because she marries Kent. I'm going to move on to page 8 of the report now. And I just put a real quick screenshot of a genealogy fan of Eliza Bear. We got some work in progress here to do. I need to get in touch with a few more people to expand on that. But we know quite a bit about them. We can go back to, you know, the mid 18th century with them. And we know that Chief Black Powder, which is the dad to Chief Bear, Chief Big Bear, he's born and raised around here where I'm from, Athabasca. He's actually in Lac La Biche, buried in Lac La Biche, which is just down the road. I also put in an Indian roll citation here. So I put in a screenshot of the U.S. Indian Census rolls on the 30th of June, 1896, showing the Rocky Boy Indian Reservation. And this confirms that they end up on the Rocky Boy Indian Reservation. This documentation can be pulled. It's public information. The hereditary paternal relatives in the above census show James Little Bear, her second great-grandfather, Ali Le Ma Wasi Little Bear, Sarah's second great-grandmother, and Eliza Lemire, her great-grandmother, are all documented here on the U.S. Indian Census roll recorded on the 30th of June, 1896 in Rocky Boy. I'm going to move on to page 9 of the report now, and it shows another census roll of the Rocky Boy Indian Reservation. This one's from 1932. Lists Sarah's hereditary paternal relatives as Eliza Blacktongue, her great-grandmother, and Eliza is living with her husband and brother-in-law at that point because Patrice has passed away, and she remarries. And here we just can kind of continue on to describe Antoine. He's, born in Montana, passes away in 48. We don't have a lot of documentation on Antoine. Some of the stuff I can add in our next presentation. If somebody wants to see the Indian Census rolls of Fort Belknap, I'll add them in the next presentation. It's just not as critical to link Antoine today. Marie Florestine Lemire is Sarah's maternal great-grandmother, born on the 22nd of May, 1874 in LeBret Mission, Assiniboia Territory, Northwest Territories. And LeBret is basically like the Qu'Appelle Valley, which is really close to where my relatives settled, or I shouldn't say settled, that is their historical homeland. I was raised in the Qu'Appelle Valley. Marie Florestine Lemire ends up passing away on the Rocky Boy Reservation in 1859. She shows up on the Fort Belknap census, U.S. Indian Census rolls, and of course her spouse is Antoine Gladjo. And my goodness, I'm not going to name all the kids there, but there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 kids. That's a huge family, Sarah. I can't believe it.
Yep.
So I'm going to move on to page 10 here, and it shows another screenshot of a document here. And right, yeah, so this is the baptism. So the citation says Marie Florestine Lemire baptism on the 22nd of May, 1874 at LeBret Mission in Sacred Heart. That was basically where one of the residential schools was. They've all burned down now. It's a very similar history to what the Sun River schools were like. It's a similar thing. We all spoke French at that time. Sarah's hereditary maternal relatives documented in that baptism in 1874 are Marie Florestine Lemire, her great-grandmother, Peter Pierre Lemire, her second great-grandfather, and Therese Pelletier, her second great-grandmother. And then we have Theodore Brienne, her maternal great-grandfather. He's born 1881 in Montana, passes away in Montana, got hit by a train unfortunately. Sorry to hear that. We know that from some other documents on his death record. I can share that later if somebody wants to see that. But just a quick description of the screenshot I took here of the Indian census roll. The citation shows it's a U.S. Indian census roll, 1885 of the Dakota Territory. Sarah's hereditary maternal relatives listed above are Alexandra Brienne, her second great-grandfather, Adelaide Dauphinese Saint-Denis, her second great-grandmother, and Theodore Brienne, her great-grandfather. Theodore is living with his parents at Turtle Mountain in 1885. That census record shows them in Turtle Mountain in 1885. I'm on to page 11 now. Rose Huell, her maternal great-grandmother, born 26th of December, 1890, up in North Dakota. At that time, it was North Dakota, no longer the Dakota Territory. Passes away in 1942 in Montana, buried at Calvary Cemetery. She marries, of course, Theodore Brienne. They have 4, 5, 6, 7 children together there. They show up on this Rocky Boy Reservation census here from 1930, United States Federal Census Records. And in that Rocky Boy Reservation 1930 US Census, it shows her hereditary maternal relatives as Rose Huell, her great-grandmother, Sarah Brienne, her grandmother. Rose is living with her children at Rocky Boy Reservation after her husband passed away. And she does remarry Joseph Aladidid and has 2 more children later on. I'm going to move on to the 5th generation now on page 12. And have a sip of orange juice. How are you doing, Sarah?
I'm hanging in there.
Man, that's a mouthful. That 4th generation, that's huge. So I'm going to move on to the 5th generation. Just there's a lot of data in the 5th generation, of course, because there's close to 16 people to cover. So I didn't put everything in here, of course, but I put as much in as I could. And so we're going to start off the 5th generation on page, what is that? Page 12 shows Michif LeDeau, Sarah's paternal second great-grandfather, born up in the Northwest Territories, passes away in 1906. We do have some birth records that I can bring up in the next presentation. I just didn't have time to get it in there with all the editing. It just doesn't have a significant amount of connection to Big Bear. But his wife's name is Louise Desjardins, which is Sarah's paternal second great-grandmother. She's born north of the Medicine Line up here at La Pas, Northwest Territories. La Pas is kind of like in northern Manitoba, pretty close to the Saskatchewan-Manitoba border along the river as it flows into Hudson's Bay. Louise, of course, is married to Michif, and they had 2 children, Louise Napoleon and Pierre. Somebody I really had a thrill of introducing myself to during Sarah's genealogy research was a gentleman by the name of Ignace Zenon Poitras Sr., Sarah's paternal second great-grandfather, born 1829, Assiniboia Territory on the Anishinaabe homeland. Death in 1922 at Patoche, Saskatchewan, buried at the Patoche Cemetery. He marries Helene McGillis. They have 9 or 10 children together. But what's really significant is the photo of the Métis prisoners of Patoche. And I always get goosebumps up and down my spine when I see that picture. Man. So here he is. He's captured. He's shackled in the chain gang with all of his so-called co-conspirators. Photograph above shows Métis prisoners of Patoche on the left, and then we have a portrait in color of Ignace in handcuffs on the right. And notice he's got a Métis sash. That's a pretty cool sash. And you can kind of see the smirk on that red coat in the back with the white hat, eh? He's just like, haha. Anyways, that whole resistance just makes me anxious, and I'll go on more about that later. So I'm going to move on to page 13 of the report now here and elaborate a little bit more on Helen McGillis, Sarah's paternal second great-grandmother, born in St. Francis Xavier on Assiniboia territory within the Anishinaabe homeland. Passes away in Batoche, buried at Batoche. Of course, her spouse is Ignace, that we just spoke about. And they get married on the 9th of September in 1856. I have a birth record of Helen Poitras that I can put in the next presentation if needed, but it is there. I do have it. It's just had a significant amount of trouble fitting it in with the editing. So we're going to move on to the birth record that just to describe that it reveals her hereditary paternal second great-grandmother, her second great-grandfather, and great-grandmother. And I'll have that inserted for the next presentation. Here next we have Peter Pierre Lemaire, Sarah's paternal second great-grandfather, and is also her maternal second great-grandfather. I'll elaborate on that a little bit further. He's born in Fort Pelly, which is a famous fur trading post up here in the, well, it's in current contemporary location would be Manitoba and the Assiniboia territory within the Anishinaabe homeland. He passes away in 1876 in Canada. He marries Therese Peltier, and they had 5 kids. Oh, man. And here we have Pierre in a record. So the citation shows a marriage record of Pierre Lemire and Therese Peltier on the 12th of September, 1858. Paternal hereditary relatives listed above, of course, are Joseph Lemire, her second great-grandfather, Julie Martin, her third great-grandmother, Therese Peltier, her second great-grandmother, and Pierre Lemire, her second great-grandfather. And I'll move on to the next page on page 14 here. It just goes on to describe a little bit more about Therese Peltier as her second great-grandmother. She's born at St. Boniface, which is Winnipeg now, in the Assiniboia territory at the time, within the Anishinaabe homeland. Quite a few research notes on her. She also shows up on petition 31. There's a lot of stuff there on. I can elaborate on her on the next presentation if required. But I really want to focus on this image, which is our next person in the 5th generation. And his name, I'm sure he needs no introduction, is Chief Little Bear, the son of Chief Big Bear. James Little Bear is Sarah's paternal second great-grandfather. I found this wonderful picture of him. I thought I'd share it with y'all. Did stumble across his obituary, very honored by his community. And it describes him a little bit there within that obituary. He's born in 1840 in Little Hills, Saskatchewan, passes away on the Rocky Boy Reservation in 1921. He does show up in a U.S. Indian Census roll in the Oklahoma agency of and it's called the Abrinti Shawnee tribe, which is basically the U.S. government kind of pushing us all into one community like they did in Oklahoma, right? And it was Oklahoma 2.0 in Montana. It was just another way of the government to steal our identity and our land. So anyways, I wanted to just highlight that because when I stumbled across that U.S. Indian Census roll of 1896, I had spent a lot of time trying to decipher it. What does that mean, Oklahoma, right? And so it's important to know that, and I'll elaborate on that a little bit more here in a couple seconds. So he marries, of course, first of all, Ali Le Masi. I hope I said that right, Little Bear, which is his wife, and they have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 children. And then he also marries a lady by the name of Badface, but that's not hereditary to Sarah. and they have a few children as well. So I'm going to move on to this U.S. Indian Census roll of June 30, 1896 of the Abrinti Shawnee tribe in the Oklahoma Agency. And this just shows how we were scooped up and pushed off our land by the government. And it does show James Little Bear at the bottom there. He's about the, what is that, about the 8th or 10th entrance from the bottom there. And you can see his wife, Alile Mawasi, and lists their children. And Eliza shows up there. That's critical because Eliza Little Bear is a granddaughter of Chief Big Bear, right? And so the hereditary paternal relatives listed above show James Little Bear, her second great-grandfather, Alile Ma Little Bear, second great-grandmother, and Eliza Little Bear, her great-grandmother. Alile Ma Asi Little Bear is Sarah's paternal second great-grandmother. Excuse me. She's born 1861, and we don't know exactly when she passed away. I've got some other records on her as well that I can elaborate on in our next presentation if needed. And I'm going to move on to page 16 now. And here we got Modeste Morris Glado, her maternal second great-grandfather, born in the Wisconsin Territory. Well, it was Wisconsin Territory at the time, it's probably Minnesota now. Passes away in Lodgepole, Montana. Quite a few research notes on him as well. He marries Marie Ajou. They have a few children, well, more than a few, as you can see. And I did find a very interesting census data on Modeste, and here it is. The citation notes it as the 1880 U.S. Census of St. Peter's Mission, Montana. And the hereditary maternal relatives listed above show Modeste Glado, her second great-grandfather, Marie Melanie Gladu, née Ajou, her second great-grandmother, and Antoine Gladu, her great-grandfather, Sarah's great-grandfather. And I'll just go on a little bit to describe Marie Ajou, her second great-grandmother, born at Pembina, Dakota Territory, passes away at the Fort Belknap Reservation in 1933. She shows up on some other documentation there, as you can see in my research notes. And of course, they had quite a few children together. Very important document, that 1880 census of St. Peter's Mission. There's a lot of data on there. I'm going to move on to page.
That's another chieftain line right there too. That's the Chief Little Thunder line there. Joseph Gorno. That's his line there.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for sharing that. I have so much more to learn about that line.
Yeah,
and,
they were twin. They were twin brothers, and their last names were Gorno, and the other one took Azure, but they were brothers. And Joseph Gorno, Joseph Azure, and they're from the Little Thunder line, and that's where all the Azures came from.
Nice. Awesome.
Sarah, we talked about that before. She comes from the Little Thunder chieftainship too. Yeah, I'll clean it up. Beautiful. This is a beautiful genealogy.
Thank you, David, for sharing that. And so, yeah, the Azure line, like you said, is very critical, and they are Pembina. Definitely, they show up in a lot of places, and there's still a lot for me to learn on the Azure line. And they are documented later on in the Bureau of Indian Affairs Petition 31.
It's actually Chief Little Shell's brother was Little Thunder. And so this is where the family start intertwining quite a bit.
Exactly. Yeah. And so we're going to just move on from Azure onto Peter Pierre Lemire now. And this is Sarah's paternal second great-grandfather, and also her maternal second great-grandfather. So she's got him on both sides of the tree. I'll elaborate on that a little bit later. He's born at Fort Pelly, another famous fur trading post. There's quite a few research documents on him. I have a lot on him. He marries Therese Pelchier, and they have a few kids together up there. And Therese Peltier, his wife, is born in St. Boniface in 1833. Passes away there as well in 1903. Had a decent time. Would have seen a lot of changes happening in the borders and the changes in our societies. She, of course, her spouse is Peter Lemire, and they have Francois, Patrick, Caroline, Marie Florstein, and Albert. I'm going to move on to the next family here, and we have Alexander Breuer-Brienne, said a couple of different ways. There's a lot of different pronunciations of that name. I'll go on to that later. Alexander is Sarah's maternal second great-grandfather, born on the 5th of January, 1850 at Spirit Lake, Dakota Territory. Passes away in 1926 in Sheridan, Montana. Marries Adeline Dauphiness St. Denis, and their child is Joseph Gabriel, and he also marries Ellen Brienne, which is Sarah's line here, and their children are Theodore, Ulrich, Mary, Mitchell, Napoleon, Robert, and Harris, and that line shows up also in the BIA Petition 31. We have Ellen Brienne. This is Alexander's wife and Sarah's maternal great-grandmother, born in 1864. We're not sure where. Not much on her birth, but we do have quite a bit as she's married life. Shows up in some census records there, and they have quite a few children together, as I've already elaborated on. And then we'll move on to Norbert Huell. This is Sarah's maternal great-grandfather. He's born 1859 at Walla Walla in the Wisconsin Territory. Passes away in 1940 on Rocky Boy. His spouse marries twice here. He marries Caroline McLeod, and then marries Rosalie Vivier, which is Sarah's line, and they have several children together. They do show up here on a census record on page 18 of the report here. The citation notes it as the 1906 Canada Census of Manitoba, Saskatchewan, and Alberta at Coupel, which is the Assiniboine territory. And we're on Fort Coupel, the Coupel Valley, where I'm from as well. In the census above, it notes Norbert Huell as her second great-grandfather, Rosalie Vivier as second great-grandmother, and Rose Huell, her great-grandmother. Pardon me if my voice is a little bit off. I'm just getting over a flu. Rosalie Vivier is Sarah's maternal second great-grandmother. She's born 1870 in Walla Walla on the Dakota Territory, passes away in Montana. Shows up on quite a few census records as well in the July 1st, 1921 Rocky Boy Reservation census. And I'm going to move on to the next generation, which of course everybody's been waiting for, the sixth generation, and the big introductory of Mistahi Makwa, Big Bear, legend, signatory to Treaty 6. I've got a few pictures there on page 19, just stuff that you can find on the internet, right? In the image of him wearing a blanket, holding a pipe, he's shackled up in Stony Mountain there. During the 1885 resistance after he's arrested, of course, and then it shows him walking out of that penitentiary after he served his time. He served his time to society, and he should be exonerated. That was a farce. That's another topic. I'll move on to page 20, and here we have the historic picture of 1884, where Big Bear has a fancy hat with some feathers on it. And I love this photo because it shows how well we were working together before the resistance. As fur trading historians love this picture, and that's Fort Pitt, of course, that was burned down in the resistance of 1885. I've been to that location. They're currently restoring that location because it is historical signing of Treaty 6 at that specific spot. And the image above, of course, you can find a lot of stuff on the internet of it. I have a relative that shows up in there named Angus McKay, and I'm sure that a lot of other relatives of Sarah's are in here as well as mine and all of ours, because we, in some way, we're all interconnected. I'll go on to just quickly describe Mustahi Makwa, Chief Big Bear, Sarah's paternal third great grandfather. He's born up at Jackfish Lake in Saskatchewan Territory in 1825, passes away January 17th, 1888, in cut knife. Just shortly after he served his prison sentence. At least he got out and was able to see daylight on free land and free. Research notes on him. You can got quite a bit of data on the Find a Grave ID number there. If you want to Google a little bit more about him, it shows more on his Find a Grave. He does show up in some other documents as well. He has a child with Menequis Mustahi Makwa, and of course their children are Therese, James, and Ima, I'm gonna say. We're going to move on to the next family member of Sarah's here in the 6th generation, Marguerite Grant, which is Sarah's paternal third great grandmother via Ignace Poitras, and Sarah's maternal fourth great grandmother via Alexander Brienne. She's born 1775, Coppell, baptized in St. Ours, Quebec. She passes away 1866, St. Boniface, Assiniboia Territory. Her spouse, pretty important guy by the name of Andre Henry Poitras. And they have several children together. But she does remarry to Michel Bellemeur Monette after Andre passes away. Sarah's hereditary to the Andre Poitras line. And I'll just go on to page 21 of the report, and I'll show a citation here of the Hudson's Bay Company Archives record for Henry Poitras. Documents, of course, his history of as a fur trader, and these documents can be found in the Hudson's Bay Company Archives in Winnipeg. They have a wonderful resource online, but the important data I found here was his wife, Marguerite, is documented in here, as well as Ignace, Pierre, and Marie Breyer. And that's a critical genealogy document for me because of the fur trade. And that's how we link a lot of children of the fur trade in the Métis Michif community. Because it wasn't just Europeans having a kid with a native, you had to be a fur trader. That's how you were Michif. And you were given a wife by the chief, or you wouldn't have been able to survive on hinterland. There's no way. You had to have a good wife, a good woman to teach you how to live if you're from Europe, because there's no way you would have survived in Canada on the land. Anyways, that shows Henry Poitras. I'm going to move on to page 22. The 7th generation here, Marguerite Utiniwasis is the mother, of course, of Marguerite, Henry Poitras' wife there. She's Sarah's paternal fourth great grandmother, born in 1755 at the Coppell Fort, or Rivière Coppell, they called it. It was founded by Pierre Laverandière. And she passes away in 1799 in St. Eustache.
Another chieftain line. This is the Chief Red Bear's sister. This is the granddaughter of Chief Mama Gazeta, big chief of the Great Chippewa Nation.
Yeah, exactly. And she ends up marrying Cuthbert James Grant Sr. And they have several children. One famous one is Cuthbert Grant Jr., the leader of the Nehiel plot and the warden of the plains. And as you said too, David, I'm going to move on to the 8th generation here to just elaborate a little bit more on the Utiniwasis line. Her dad is Chief Redleaf Wapasha here on to page 23 of the report, and it shows Chief Redleaf as the paternal 5th great grandfather of Sarah. He's born at Cass Lake near the mouth of the Rum River and passes away in 1806 in Minnesota. There's quite a bit of data on him in the Find a Grave and they have a lot of children. The line that Sarah's hereditary to is the Claire Iqawid Adik Songab. And of course, their child is Margaret Utini Wasps.
I have to say so. I have to say something, Carl.
Yeah.
This is the most remarkable chieftains of the 1700s was Wapasha and Mama Gazita, and they were half brothers, one over the Ojibwe, one over the Oshetty-Sakau and the Sioux, and they met on the battlefield. I'm sure you know the story. They were led to fight each other, and one of the brothers called out as my brother there. And so
Oh,
she
really?
has connection, and she has and they saw the heart of their mother, and they stopped for they didn't fight, and they restored the Nayawat. And this is so she's connected twice to the two most principal chieftain lines of the 1700s.
That's right. It's huge. That's huge. It's a huge story, right? Thank you. There's a lot more to be told on this story. And I'd leave that up to our elders who are more educated on that. I'm more the genealogy expert. I just quickly moving on to page 23. Well, sorry, that's page 23 just shows a quick picture of Chief Redleaf. And then I'll move on to page 24 here, just to quickly describe the links to Chief Redleaf, to Sarah LeDeau. Here we have a genealogy fan description of Ignace Zenon Platra, the great-grandson to Chief Redleaf, Wapasha, and the 2 times great-grandfather to Sarah LeDeau. So that's, she links to Chief Redleaf through that line, the Platra line, and also on the genealogy fan description of Alexander Brienne, being the second great-grandson to Chief Redleaf and a 2 times great-grandfather to Sarah. And that concludes most of my data I have on the genealogy. I'm just going to quickly review my conclusion, and then we'll move on to a public open forum if we want. After revealing 8 generations linked directly to Sarah Schmasow, ni LeDeau, it is conclusive her lineage is tangible to Pembina Chippewa, Treaty 6 Cree, and the Métis Nation. The resilience of the Pembina Chippewa was achieved by working together with existing Indigenous tribes of Turtle Island after raiding multiple Blackfoot camps with Mustahi Makwa leading the crew, and of course the Warden of the Plains, Cuthbert Grant. The Plains Ojibwe coexisted and mixed with Cree to enhance their way of life after forced removal from their historic Anishinaabe homeland. In addition to genealogical relations, Sarah Schmasow has multiple hereditary links to the list of people inclusive to Petition 31 to the Bureau of Indian Affairs dated October 27, 2009. In our next meeting, we will continue linking Sarah's and Mujams to the petition to BIA. That's the end of my genealogy report. Thank you for listening.